In this video I'm going to explain the operation of the channel mode in the OpenGD77 firmware. This is the channel mode display in DMR mode, and as you can see it's got the talk group, the current repeater. Underneath that the text is the zone, so this is my VK3 DMR zone, and also that this is the first channel in that zone. The reason that it's now showing the channel number in the zone is that you can do direct numerical entry to get a particular channel in the zone, which can be quite useful if you're listening on bands which say have specific channel numbers. So for example, if I was to go to Marine band, which I've got in here, that's CB, Australian CB. Okay, so I'm on Marine band here. So assuming you've set up the channels such that channel 1 in the zone is the first channel, Marine channel 2 is the second, then basically any number, I'm just going to do this, I'm just going to do 5 actually, so I'm going to enter 5, so it's saying go to 5, and then if that is the 5th channel, then we should be on Marine channel 5. Now obviously if you've got some mismatch such that the 5th channel in that zone isn't channel 5, I mean I'm not sure all of these actually are lined up, so I'm just going to do channel 16, which is Marine calling, and I'll just see whether that lines up. Yeah, that's okay. Now if I was to pick a much higher number, the Marine band channel numbers, there's gaps in the list, so if I wanted to go to 67, that would be I couldn't actually get there by typing 67, so I don't even think there's 67 channels in this zone. Though if I get to say go to 32 or something, let's have a look. Okay, yeah, 32 goes to 63 because there's not, I don't have a one-to-one mapping between the number and the actual channel, because some channels just don't exist in the Marine band. One way to get around that would be to put in a load of dummy channels, so you could create, say, you know, channel 28 or something if that doesn't exist, and put that in here anyway. Such that you'd get a one-to-one mapping, but you just need to remember that those aren't real channels in that case. If you put in dummy channels, I guess you could name them something. Anyway, so here on the Marine channel 16, that's in FM, so you can see the zone is Marine, and the that's its name of the channel, and it's the 16th channel in the thing. Now if I was to actually go in the zone list, the zones I actually have, I've got some zones which are all set to receive only, which is the Marine band, Australian CB. Now in addition to all of the channels, all of the zones, like that's my VK3 DMR zone for all the repeaters, VK3 FM and the VK3 70 centimeters. In addition to those, there's this thing called the All Channels zone. Now what All Channels zone is, it's a virtual zone that's created by the firmware, and that zone includes all channels. So if I was to select the All Channels zone, then we're now in channel 1 of that zone, which that just happens to be the very first channel in my radio, happens to be VK3 RGL on DMR. Now if I was to go in the opposite direction, I've actually hit the down arrow, so rather than going up through the channels, I've gone back down the other way, and you can see that I've actually got 188 channels, and the last channel that's actually in the code plug is the top end of the Australian CB frequencies. And by pressing the up and down arrows, obviously I can cycle through, and if you happen to know, okay, there's somebody on that one. So if I happen to know, well now I know it's like, you know, 188 or something. I think that was the one. Oh, sorry, I've typed 155. That doesn't really matter. Let's go to 155 and see what that one is. Probably a CB one. Yes, okay, so that's CB channel 46R, probably a repeater channel. So if you happen to remember the numbers, or want to remember the numbers to directly get to them, you can also do that either in just a zone within for a small number of things, or in the all channel zone. To switch between zones, there's a couple of methods of doing that. You can go to the menu and obviously pick the zone, and then say go back to VK3 DMR zone. Or the alternative method, if you've got two adjacent zones that you're switching between, let's say for example that I'm listening on the zone. Let's say I'm listening on the Marine, and I know I want to just go and listen to CB instead, what you can do, you can press the blue function key on the side and then press the up and down arrows, and what that does is actually switch zone. So if I go up from the marine zone, I end up in the CB zone, and if I let's go back down as marine, then I've got my hotspot zone, and then go into the VK3, 70 centimeters, 2 meters, DMR, and then back to the you can cycle around into the all channel zone as well. So it allows pretty quick access to switch between zones, especially if they're adjacent zones. Obviously, if you've got loads of zones, it's probably going to be quicker to go into the zones menu perhaps and go up and down. Really, you know, whatever suits the best way to operate for your particular circumstances. I think in the other videos I've been through the other functionality in terms of what's on the display, which is pretty much the rest of the stuff is pretty much the same as in the VFO. In FM on the in channel mode, pretty much the same thing. All the same functions in terms of switching zones, etc. Now, both the channel screen and also the VFO screen have both got a quick or easy access menu, which you can get to by pressing the orange button on top of the radio. Now, this is a context sensitive menu, meaning that the menu you will get on the VFO screen is different to this one that you'll see on the channel screen. Because the sort of things you want to do on the VFO screen is different to the sort of things you want to do on the channel screen. I'll just quickly show you. I'll just switch to the VFO a second and then go into the VFO quick menu. Now on the VFO, what it allows you to do is switch between VFO A and B, and swap the TX and RX frequencies, or put the RX frequency into the TX or TX into the RX. Some things are common across both the quick menus, like turning off the filter for time slot is common to both, and some things aren't, like the CC color code scan and tone scan are different between the two. So I'm just going to come out of that quick menu, go back into the channel screen, and then go back into the channels quick menu. Okay. So by default, the first item on the quick menu is the scan, and that's put there on purpose because there's if you want to quickly scan, you can press the orange button on the top to bring up the quick menu, and then just for the scan option you can then push the orange button again, and that acts as a confirm, but only for the scan option. The other options in here you need to use the green menu key and the arrows, left and right arrow keys, to select them. So as an example of the scan, I forget which zone I'm in. Actually, I'm just going to go and check. I'm going to put myself, say, into the marine zone. Okay, so we're into the marine zone now, and I'm just going to press the orange button and then the orange button again, and there it is, scanning the marine zone. It's light. Okay, it's not finding anything at the moment. It's quiet, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so I'm just going to push the red key to stop the scanning a second, and then just go back into the quick menu and show the other options. Now, common to both the VFO and the channel quick menu is whether the time slot filtering is enabled for DMR. At the moment the filtering is on, it's got time slot filtering on, but if I want to turn that off, you can push the left arrow, turns it off, and then push the green to confirm. Actually, if I need to be in VM, I need to actually be in DMR mode for that to actually display here. I think, to be honest, what that this option should be set to not applicable if I'm in FM mode. I mean, it will set that option. It's just I won't be in FM mode at the time, so maybe that that could be confusing, and maybe that could be improved. Anyway, so I'm leaving that set to off. The other things you can do on the quick menu, you can transfer the current channel to the VFO. Which will be quite handy if you want to actually, it's probably the easiest way of actually modifying what you have in the channel. Let's say, for example, let's go to a repeater, so let's just, or let's say I want to change my duplex hotspot frequency or something in the channel. The easiest thing to do, well, in fact, yeah, by far the easiest way of changing this is to copy that channel into the VFO, and I've just got some arbitrary frequencies set up. I've got a 7 meg split on my duplex VFO. So what I can do is I can actually change the frequency here. I'm not actually going to update it now, but I'll demonstrate it in a second. So I can actually change the frequency and other settings to do with this, to do with the VFO. Then go back into the channel screen, and I can then go and copy the VFO back into the channel. Now please be aware, if you copy the VFO back into the channel, that will overwrite whatever settings you have in that channel. So though it's a great way of setting everything up and making sure you can check everything works in the VFO and you can write it into the channel, but once you press the green button to accept that, that's it. That has then committed and overwritten the channel effectively in the code plug in the radio. So that's the at the moment, that's what we've got on the quick menu for the channel screen. Now, scanning at the moment is only available on the channel screen. There's no frequency scanning on the VFO at the moment. I'm sure we will be putting that in sooner or later, but we don't have that at the moment. So, as I previously demonstrated, if I just I can hit the green on there also to scan, or just press the orange button twice, and well, I'm just scanning my my hotspots channel, which zone, which has only got a couple of channels in it, so that's not much of a demonstration. Let's go back onto the marine and then hit scan and scan again to scan the marine. Okay. There's one other option which is quite pertinent to the scanning, and that is the squelch setting, because obviously if you've got some weak signals you want to be able to receive. The default setting of the squelch is probably a little bit too tight. So I'm just going to now go into the menu and the options screen. Okay, so we'll go into the options screen and then look at the default squelch. So now the marine channels are on VHF. So at the moment the squelch, the default squelch is set to 20% for VHF. Now if I was to start winding that down, that's opened up the receiver. To be honest, it's set quite well anyway, but the default for that is 45%, or which is just an arbitrary value. I mean, it's around about S5, but could be slightly lower, and it really depends on each individual radio what that comes out as. It just seems to be a workable value, though, to save the squelch kind of opening up all the time. But the chances are, if you're in a low QRM environment, you can probably wind back the default squelch and use a much lower default squelch. And I find 20 is okay here, even though I've got a reasonable amount of QRM on VHF. So scanning on VHF, I've got that to 20%. Now, and the reason that's opening up the squelch now is because I do actually have it set to a VHF channel. If I was to start changing the, say, the UHF squelch, it's not going to make any difference at all because I'm not on a UHF channel. So coming out of here, I'm just going to exit back out of that, and let's say go up onto the CB, which is a UHF band over here, and go back into the options, and then change the UHF squelch, let's say. Okay, so it's much lower. I'm getting a much lower QRM noise floor on UHF than I am on VHF, so I'm going to probably set that to 20%. Actually, I think I may have the VHF set to 20 as well, so maybe they are the same, but that's a better setting for it than what it was set to before. Okay, so I'm just going to save that, and then that means that when I'm scanning on UHF, let's say for CB, in this case, yeah, there we go, it's stopped because there was a station there briefly. Yeah, goodness knows what they're saying, so I'm going to turn the volume back down. But yeah, so that's that operation in terms of setting the squelch. Now, if you've individually set the squelch in the CPS on a particular channel, let's say one particular channel is quite noisy, probably not going to be able to find one now. I mean, that's actually got somebody on it. Yeah, that's still got somebody on it. Maybe that one appears to be free. If you've got an individual squelch which you have set up for on that particular channel in the CPS, or you using this method of actually setting the squelch in a particular channel and going into the channel options and resaving that into the code plug, then that squelch setting will be used in preference to the default squelch. The default squelch will only apply to channels where you haven't set a custom squelch on that channel. Now I'm just going to hit, I don't really want to set a custom squelch on CB channel 27, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to press red, and to be honest, even if I push green it wouldn't make any difference at this point because I'm just putting a temporary override on it. If you actually want to set the squelch, particularly set the squelch on a channel, what you would need to do is you need to go into the channel details screen, which is the easiest way is just the function plus the green key, and then just press green key again to resave it from the channel details, because the actual normal channel display doesn't make any updates to the code plug. Now the reason for not just writing it back to the code plug every time you change something is because I think people just wouldn't realise that that's what they're doing, that they're constantly adjusting the squelch for that particular channel. They probably think that they're just setting a squelch across all channels, which isn't correct. The other reason is actually a technical reason, in that the code plug for the channels could potentially be stored in the flash memory. Now the flash memory has got a slightly limited number of times in which you can update it. I mean, it's something like 20,000 times, but if you're constantly fiddling around and changing squelch all the time, it's going to basically slowly wear out the flash memory. Hence the channel data in the code plug only actually gets updated if you go into the channel details and you hit the green key, or the other time it will get updated is if you read the VFO into the channel, and in that case it will also update the code plug. But just modifying the squelch on a channel is only a temporary override. And in fact, even with reading the, I'm just going to change onto a channel that's not quite as noisy. Just one on the local. Actually, if I go to one of these repeaters, I can't actually hear from here. I think it's likely that this feature of VFO to channel we're likely to stick in another screen, a confirm screen, because I have had feedback from people saying they hadn't realised that if they copy the VFO into the current channel that it will permanently overwrite the current channel. I mean, it seems logical it would do that. I can't see a reason you'd want to read it into a channel and then do nothing on that channel apart from stay there, especially considering the radio has now got the channel plus 2 VFOs. But anyway, it probably is something that will be added into the firmware fairly soon, just so as people are aware that if they do copy from VFO to channel, that is going to permanently overwrite the channel. Just briefly, I should have covered this on the scanning, but I'm just going to go back to say marine channels again, duplex marine. Okay, I'm just going to go back to marine channels and I'm just going to do scanning again. Okay, I'm just going to start scanning. Now there's a couple of features in the channel scanning that which I should have covered before. The first one is the nuisance channel skip. I'll tell you what, I'm going to try and see if there's anybody on CB. More likely to want to skip over a nuisance channel on CB. Okay, so let's say that there's somebody on this channel all the time, or there's noise or something and you want to skip over it. Let's say this one, there's probably somebody talking. Yeah, okay, there's somebody talking on that one. So while it's actually stopped on this channel, what you can do is you can press the down arrow, and what that does is that marks it as a nuisance or a channel to avoid. So there's somebody on that channel as well, and you might decide you want to avoid that while it's still stopped. And I'll go around again, and we'll find another one to avoid. Okay, 15. Okay, so what I've done is now I've put an avoid or a nuisance marker on 2 of the channels in the scan. So it'll scan round and basically it'll just skip over those. It does actually spend about 1 millisecond going through those as it switches in and just switches straight back out of that channel. At the moment it doesn't completely hop over it, taking no time at all. but it still should be fine for most people. I don't know, I guess some people might want to avoid loads and loads and loads of channels, but maybe not. The other thing you can do is, if you're just on a channel and it's holding because somebody's talking, like that one, you can just hit the up arrow, and then there's still somebody on that one, and then it will just carry on the scan. Now that's not marked as an avoid, it just tells the scan to carry on. So I think that's really just about covered the scan functionality and everything else really at the moment on that's specific to the channel screen. Obviously the pace of development is moving quite quickly, so within a month or two, or maybe even less, there may be changes and enhancements to the channel screen and to those functions, and I'll make another video when there's any significant updates to the channel screen.